All right. So, yesterday, um, before dinner was a lot of negative emotions, a lot of frustration related to software and other stuff. And then for the couple hours around dinner time were awesome. Just like really great conversations with Katie and feeling really inspired and excited and eager and certain. And then some other stuff happened after dinner related to um, more software and business stuff that was sort of another downturn. Um, and then during this 2 hours this morning, I was feeling this, I guess, disappointment with the 19 previous days of this pattern of doing 2 hours a day, and expecting more positive results or insights or something, um, and sort of feeling frustrated and like impatient, I guess. And obviously, this is all the stuff that I sort of wanted to be working on and wanted to sort of work my way out of impatience and into more acceptance and allowing and just being. And I don't know. So, I've been thinking recently about how much I love feeling impressed. The emotion of feeling impressed is potentially one of my favorites, as opposed to feeling disappointed. It's like disappointed versus impressed. And feeling impressed is like, that might even be better than feeling loved. I feel like there's this aspect to it of surprise, just like an overwhelming appreciation with a tinge of surprise or something. I don't know. It's just like this really cool emotion, and I I love when I feel impressed, and I feel like it's not as much as I want. I want to feel impressed by more things more frequently, and disappointed way less frequently. And so then, during this 2 hours, that's what was coming up for me, and I was thinking like, um, what if how could what if I were the universe? I was some sort of master orchestrator of how my body works and how my mind works and how physics, everything works. I would want to sort of dampen I'd want to sort of hinder, minimize those downswings from yesterday or any day, like before and after dinner. um, those sort of negative emotions, I'd want those not to feel so severe, and I'd want the positive emotions to feel emphasized and just like even more vivid and colorful and amazing. And then, you know, it occurred to me that that's sort of a slippery slope, and that doesn't really make sense because what's to say that why not, why stop there? Why not go even more and say, like, there are no negative emotions and I'm only feeling absolute bliss and I'm just like blissed out all the time? Um, and so that's in one direction. The other direction is because if I were just like orchestrating how everything worked, how I reacted to everything, and if I just chose some arbitrary amount of negativity to not feel and the arbitrary amount of positivity that I thought, from now on I'm going to feel this much positive about these different things that are happening. Um, the other direction would be pushing it to like, what if, that's already, what if my experience now is relative to some other possible experience, it is that way. Like my positive emotions are way more positive than some other possibility, and my negative emotions are way less severe than some other possibility. So it's all completely arbitrary anyway. So it's sort of like, given that, I don't know, it just feels like it sort of comes down to existence or not, and agency or not, and just realizing that the so then my thoughts started going towards like, it's not that I don't want to be disappointed in things, and it's not that I want to be more impressed by more things more frequently. Maybe what's truer is that I am disappointed in everything and impressed by everything. Maybe not at all moments, but eventually. And so that's an interesting way of looking at it, where it's like the things that are disappointing to me in one moment are sort of really helpful and necessary in order for me to enjoy other things and to know what I've been to make it even meaningful to enjoy anything. Sort of that yin and yang principle. Um, and the if I'm feeling impressed with something for too long, then it's like I'm not expanding or growing. It's just like that was an interesting moment of the meditation where I was, contemplating feeling impressed with, some things right now that are super impressive to me, like the system of global positioning satellites, GPS, that's talking to Google Maps and on our phones, and it's just like astonishing. And that's existed for years. And Siri, like things like Siri, things like PlayStation 4, the basketball game that I play, as a software engineer, thinking about things like Siri and GPS and this basketball game and other video games, virtual reality, all this stuff. I know enough, or even things like airplanes and rocket ships. Like I know enough to know that I feel like I could never know enough to really understand how all that stuff works. And it just, I love it. I love how cool that stuff is. I love the movies like Interstellar and Inception. I love the creativity there. And so when I was thinking about all these different things that I love and I'm so impressed by, it feels like that's only a snapshot of me in a lifetime. And maybe, if there's such a thing as existence beyond a physical lifetime, then maybe there's some infinite existence. Then how quick and how minuscule is a snapshot, and how sad would it be if I remained impressed by things like that, especially given how fast technology moves. And if I think about people like my grandparents living into their 80s and thinking, they didn't have the internet. And then not only did the internet come out with 14.4K modems, eventually we got to the point where there was video chat. And my grandparents are like, what is going on? There's video chat. I'm talking to someone across the entire country and it's live video streaming through this box that I bought for a few $100s. Like, what is this? And throughout the decades, they leveled up, and their expectations changed. And same with all of us. Now we expect certain things out of our phones, and none of us even had cell phones a little while back. And so there's this, I don't know, I guess that's sort of the theme of this 2 hours, has just been that everything is only whatever it is in the moment, and everything can simultaneously be disappointing to you and impressive to you, and or to me. um, and and just to realize that this feeling like I want to feel more impressed by more things and less disappointed overall is like, doesn't really make sense, and is this sort of arbitrary need to control, as opposed to just having this much broader, much more infinite perspective, timeless perspective of it's all it's all just experiences. It's all just temporary. The only constant is change. And I guess it's sort of just a expansive thought and a relaxing thought, to be less judgmental. Um, so I don't know. It's interesting. Another thing that I've been impressed with, in terms, sort of what led to all of these other thoughts, these meta thoughts about being impressed versus disappointed, is, even though I've been disappointed in these meditations, I've been impressed with myself in doing. I've just done 40 hours of meditation in the past 20 days. So that's an entire conventional work week of sitting here with my eyes closed, not looking at the timer at all. So for 40 hours, obviously broken into 2-hour chunks, sometimes 1-hour chunks, a couple times. just committing to myself, I'm gonna sit here, and I know that I have an alarm and a backup alarm, so there's no reason for me to get out of this chair, and there's not even a reason for me to check the time. So I'm just gonna give myself this and sit here for 2 hours. And I think that going into that, I didn't know that I'd be able to do it, and especially didn't know I'd be able to do it for 20 days. So I don't know, feeling sort of impressed with that, but also like, then the later thoughts in the meditation were, I've grown into that now, and it's not so impressive anymore, and now it's old and not that meaningful, and when I sit down for 2 hours, I know I can do it, and I don't need to. It's still not enjoyable, and I'd love to be able to grow into a point where I know that it will be like no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I can find enjoyment in it. I'm not at that point, but at least it's cool to be at the point where it's like the thought of sitting in a chair for 2 hours doesn't freak me out like it did before these 20 days, and I think like it does for a lot of people thinking about this. Um, so in some sense, like there that's an example of two sides of it, and like being impressed and then also just not being impressed with now that that's true, now that that's what I've lived. Now there's a new bar, and that's one of the most exciting parts of life, I think, is like just having high standards and raising the standards, and enjoying stuff along the way. And it's also, I guess it's also one of the worst parts of life, is that destination addiction. So um, constantly moving the goalposts out further and further, even as you're approaching them, and even as you're achieving the things that you set out to achieve. By the time you get there, by the time, I keep saying you, but I think in my past, and even recently, achieving certain things, it's like even by the time I've reached that goalpost or that objective, um, and plan to celebrate like in a big way, it's like, oh, I have my eyes on that next goalpost or objective, and maybe the celebrations weren't everything that I sort of had anticipated. And so that's something that I want to be working on too, is just enjoying the journey and celebrating, and not, and looking backwards in order to enjoy the gap between where I was and where I am now, as Mario Brown, my friend Mario Brown says, um, and not always just looking at the gap between me and the next goalpost. So yeah, I guess those thoughts got a little bit unorganized, and wow, it took me longer to get those out than I thought, but day 20.